Imagine yourself in the year AD 69, when Rome, the heart of an empire spanning 3 continents, was rocked by a civil war so intense it threatened the very survival of the state. 5 men vied for the throne: Nero, Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and Vespasian. Every shift in loyalty changed the fate of legions and millions of lives. Have you ever felt that cold dread in your chest, not knowing whom to trust? In those months, the populace watched in terror as one emperor after another rose and fell. Legions demanded immediate payment, and the Senate cowered amid intrigue. That insecurity ate away at Rome faster than any barbarian invasion. In this video, we'll unravel, scene by scene, how each leader used alliances, bribes, and battles to seize power, and how Vespasian ultimately restored order. Prepare for a narrative filled with betrayals, sacrifices, and twists that defined the year of the 4 emperors. But before we dive into these tales and curiosities of the Roman Empire, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and hit the bell so you won't miss any of our videos packed with secrets and surprises about ancient Rome. Nero's death did more than dissolve a dynasty. It exposed a power vacuum that lured the austere Galba into the ruins of the imperial throne. The fall of Nero and the power vacuum. In March of AD 68, Nero ruled amid scandals of lavish excess and suffocating taxes. Grand projects like his Domus Aurea drained the treasury and alienated the populace. Frustrated by pay delays and rising levies, the legions in Gaul, led by Governor Gaius Julius Vindex, rebelled, declaring him a traitor to Rome. In Upper Germany, General Lucius Virginius Rufus faced his own troops' demands for back pay. While the Forum buzzed with rumors of imperial decay, citizens looted temples in protest, and galloping inflation devoured the price of bread. Inside the Lupanar palace, intrigue reigned. Nymphidius Sabinus, prefect of the Praetorian Guard, secretly negotiated with Servius Sulpicius Galba, promising loyalty in exchange for gold and political influence. Left without military support, Nero, isolated and fearful, considered fleeing to Parthia or begging the Senate's mercy. But his officers, demoralized and seduced by financial promises, refused to follow him. At dawn on June 9th, haunted by his unpopularity, Nero chose death over dishonor. Aided by his freedman Epaphroditus, the emperor drove a dagger into his own chest, ending an era. His body was discovered at the edge of a garden, and Rome, stunned, realized the last Julio Claudian had fallen, leaving a political void more impenetrable than any fortress. An abyss. While Nero's corpse cooled, a cold, shrewd man prepared to rise from the ashes of power: Galba. Galba takes the throne, hope and disillusion. At age 70, Servius Sulpicius Galba entered Rome to cheers from the Senate and the Praetorian Guard. Renowned for his integrity in Hispania, he wore a simple senatorial toga, symbol of a government cleansed of Nero's excesses. Though his health was frail, he displayed firmness in his early decrees. In his first edicts, he confiscated estates from nobles accused of treason, disbanded legions branded disloyal, and suspended promised bonuses to soldiers who had supported his rise, breaking pledges made to the Praetorians and veterans. Even officers in the province of Africa saw their privileges revoked. His austerity measures, intended to balance the imperial treasury, sparked outrage. In the Forum, debates on justice gave way to public insults hurled at the emperor. Senators, who had once applauded him, now feared losing their privileges. Grain supplies, essential for the daily bread of the plebs, were delayed, causing long lines and market riots, while Galba's allies hesitated to back such harsh measures. In January of AD 69, the legions of Lower Germany refused to swear allegiance, interpreting Galba's stance as disdain for their pay and recognition. The name of Piso Licinianus, Galba's designated heir, was jeered in the camps, and the political atmosphere turned tense and unpredictable. Galba's rigor, however, began to corrode old alliances, planting the seeds of vengeance in Otho's mind and uncertainty within the palace. The wrath of Otho, a betrayed ally, Marcus Salvius, Otho, former governor of Lusitania, respected for his governance and military achievements, his battle scars etched on his face, proudly donned his Praetorian cloak. When he learned Galba had named Piso Licinianus his successor, he felt scorned. His promised rewards turned to smoke. Driven by ambition, Otho forged an alliance with Nymphidius Sabinus, prefect of the Praetorian Guard, offering gold and prestigious posts. On the night of January 15th, down the narrow streets of the Palatine suburbium, the Praetorians, lured by bribes, surrounded Galba and Piso's entourage. Amid the clash of swords and armor's clang, the emperor and his heir fell, and only one centurion dared advance to protect them, only to be swiftly overwhelmed. At dawn, the heads of Galba and Piso glistened atop posts along the Via Sacra, a grim reminder that in Rome, loyalty was sold to the highest bidder. The Praetorian trumpet proclaimed Otho emperor, his throne stained with blood and the illusion of justice. In the Senate, fears grew. The Praetorian Guard had evolved from imperial protectors to kingmakers, and whispers of secret pacts echoed through the corridors. Messengers carried news to the far reaches of the empire, and the Rhine legions, under Aulus Vitellius, began organizing their standards against Otho. Yet Otho's coup ignited a fire he could not contain. The betrayal set hearts ablaze and foreshadowed even crueler conflicts, for under Vitellius's watchful eye, the empire lamented the lost peace. Otho in power, the promise of stability. Upon taking power, Otho restored Nero's statues in the Forum and reinstated freedmen from the old regime to public office, courting popular goodwill. In the squares, his pledges of clemency for deposed senators and historic justice against abuses rang like music, raising hopes of a fresh start. But while Rome celebrated, the legions of Lower Germany raised their standards for Aulus Vitellius. Rather than parley, Vitellius marshaled his troops along the Rhine and marched for Italy, confident that military might would cement his claim. Aware of the threat, Otho summoned legions from Dalmatia, Pannonia, and Moesia, units famed for their discipline and loyalty, and dispatched his fleet to secure the Ligurian coast, safeguarding supplies and communications by sea. Each unfurled standard carried a promise of support and hope, but also intensified the tension between rival camps as he prepared defenses and arranged supply columns. Otho faced the dilemma of keeping Rome united without squandering men or resources. The urgency of conflict and fear of desertion made every command bitter and imprecise, as soldiers wondered if their emperor would deliver on his promises. The German legions already bore Vitellius's banners, even as Otho pinned his own hopes on Bedriacum, bracing for the decisive clash that would determine Rome's next ruler. A Rome waited in silent suspense for the outcome that would seal its fate. The war between Otho and Vitellius. On March 14th, beneath a cold fog, Otho led his troops over the Apennines toward the plains of Bedriacum. There, in testudo formation, shields interlocked, their lines held against the initial impact, shattering Vitellius's infantry and drawing triumphant roars from Otho's legionaries. Vitellius did not hesitate. His trusted general, Marcus Antonius Primus, redeployed archers and cavalry to the flanks, turning the plain into a lethal trap. Bowmen armed with recurved bows and short spears formed a deadly belt, while heavy cavalry pressed the enemy center. Advisors urged retreat to regroup and await reinforcements, but Otho held firm, convinced that boldness would secure his future. When Otho's final assault broke, Vitellius's arrows rained mercilessly. Amid cries and armor glinting under an overcast sun, Otho's line wavered. Infantry commanders ordered the advance, but chaos reigned. Wounded troops fled, and survivors sought refuge behind campworks. Within minutes, disorder reigned. Otho's initial victory dissolved into smoke, and the dream of a united empire vanished in the cold morning air. Without cohesion or command, his men lamented their failure, and the emperor, disheartened, knew he had lost. That defeat at Bedriacum shattered Otho's last illusion and left a question hanging: who would fill the looming power vacuum in Rome? Otho's defeat and his suicide. Cornered in camp by the Metaurus River, Otho heard the enemy trumpets sounding victory. His legions, worn by winter and siege, were losing cohesion. Generals mourned their losses, and the hollow stares of officers reflected the ruin of their restoration dream. Lacking strength to resist and unwilling to shed more Roman blood, Otho made a fateful choice. On the night of April 16th, under flickering torchlight, he summoned his few loyalists, officers, Praetorian guards, and trusted friends. In a brief address, he thanked them for past victories and confessed strategic failure against Vitellius. With a voice choked by emotion, he begged forgiveness from Nero's shade and plunged a dagger into his own chest, ending his tumultuous tenure. His act was hailed as the ultimate gesture of courage and sacrifice. A stunned silence followed, broken only by murmurs from incredulous soldiers raising old standards in homage to their fallen emperor. 3 days later, on April 19th, AD 69, the Senate ratified Aulus Vitellius as emperor. Yet his tainted reputation, marred by favoritism and court scandals, and distrust across provinces, foreshadowed a fragile, divided reign. Otho's sacrifice resonated like a warning. Even in death, his cry for strong, just leadership echoed. In the distant east, legions under Titus Flavius Vespasian watched the collapse, preparing to fill the widening void before Rome. Vitellius, an emperor out of control, Aulus Vitellius, proclaimed emperor on April 19th, AD 69, ascended the throne amid lavish promises. To secure support, he showered cavalry commanders with bribes and handed out offices to sycophants. Suetonius describes extravagant feasts lasting days, with thousands of exotic dishes and imported wines, draining the imperial treasury in moments. Though he vowed to moralize the army, Vitellius banned centurions from selling service exemptions, a reform noted by Tacitus, yet the opulence of his court and officer corruption overshadowed any change. Courtiers vied for favors in exchange for loyalty. While Rome drowned in lavish festivities, the eastern provinces watched in silence. Grain shortages and shipping delays worsened famine, making Vitellius unpopular among provincial administrators. Discontent in Egypt, Syria, and Pannonia was ripe for rebellion. In July AD 69, legions in Egypt and Syria, including the ex-Fretensis and the Third Gallica, proclaimed Titus Flavius Vespasian emperor in Alexandria and Antioch. His officers restored discipline and secured grain supplies vital to millions of starving Romans. Weighed down by his own greed, Vitellius saw his eastern legions break ranks. The sparkle of his banquets turned to ashes, and the field lay open. For Vespasian's advance toward Rome, the empire would never be the same. Vespasian's rise in the east. Vespasian, veteran of the Jewish campaigns 67-69, was hailed emperor by the Egyptian legions in Alexandria, a gesture uniting soldiers and civilians. His calm demeanor, clad in polished bronze armor and a finely woven scarlet cloak, inspired confidence in hungry masses and exhausted troops alike. Meanwhile, his son Titus besieged Jerusalem, and General Marcus Antonius Primus advanced along the Danube with the 3rd Gallica and 6th Ferrata, veteran units. Known for discipline, This Eastern coalition, driven by promises of order and regular pay, proved irresistible compared to Rome's chaos. Controlling grain routes from Egypt and Syria and dominating vital ports like Alexandria and Antioch, Vespasian held the lifeline that kept Rome alive. Merchants loaded grain onto ships under Flavian escort, while senators feared a blockade of essential supplies. In July AD 69, the alliance of Eastern legions proclaimed Vespasian's divine right to restore the empire. His troops, a multi-ethnic force of veterans and auxiliaries in perfect formation, embodied Mediterranean power. The overwhelming support of Egyptian and Syrian legions brought Vespasian to Rome's doorstep, carrying the grain that fed the empire and the promise of firm leadership. The slow caravans of wheat gave way to a cohesive army marching toward Italy, sealing an end to the anarchy that was devouring Rome. The decisive battle and the fall of Vitellius in October AD 69, Marcus Antonius Primus chose a gentle plateau near Bedriacum to ambush Vitellius's forces. There, Flavian infantry advanced in testudo formation, ripping through shallow entrenchments and crushing enemy lines with unyielding discipline. Vitellius's war-weary troops, sapped by intrigue and lacking reinforcements, fought under their emperor's watch. The Praetorian cavalry sought to hold the left flank, but Flavian light cavalry pierced the defenses. Promises of bonuses rang hollow, fatigue shattered cohesion, and many soldiers cast aside arms in flight. Within hours, Vitellius's formations collapsed. Officers fell or were captured, while archers from the hills loosed incendiary arrows that set tents and supplies ablaze, spreading chaos. Captured amid the rout, Vitellius was brought to the Forum of Cremona and, according to Suetonius, executed on the spot, tied to a post and slain, ending his short reign. The blood spilled that day cemented the Flavian victory and closed months of civil war. Vitellius's fall at Bedriacum marked Vespasian's triumph, clearing the path to restore order in Rome and inaugurate the Flavian dynasty. Days later, on December 21st, the Senate recognized Vespasian as emperor, legitimizing the Flavians. Victorious, legions marched on Rome under triumphant standards, while the exhausted city envisioned reforms to prevent future upheavals. The empire finally breathed free. Vespasian takes over, end of the crisis and start of the dynasty. On December 21st, AD 69, Titus Flavius Vespasian entered Rome to cheers from Senate and populace. His campaign attire, bronze armor emblazoned with the wolf, became the emblem of renewed discipline. He swiftly enacted balanced fiscal reforms, cutting burdensome taxes, stabilizing the denarius, and restoring revenue collection in long-neglected provinces. He rebuilt temples to Venus and Mars and revitalized the Forum Boreum, as Tacitus reports. To modernize governance, he opened public service posts to the equestrian order and established the Flavian Curia. He also reformed the judiciary, sped up the cursus publicus for imperial communications, and granted land and pensions to veterans, solidifying military loyalty. In AD 70, he laid the cornerstone of the Flavian amphitheater, the future Colosseum, funded partly by spoils from the Jewish war, symbolizing imperial resources devoted to public works. Thus ended the year of the four emperors. Rome lives. Under Vespasian's reign, the Flavian dynasty would govern Rome for nearly 30 years, restoring order and prosperity. And so, amid Senate applause and trumpet fanfares, Vespasian raised the Flavian dynasty, the promise of a new dawn for Rome. If you enjoyed this journey through time and want more fascinating stories, subscribe, leave a like, and share this video with your friends. You'll help us keep delivering high-quality historical content. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video on ancient Rome and its grand empire.